Welcome to the analysis of my Halloween performances. One of my performances was a solo piece on the hand canes. I portrayed the character of a snake and performed a mixture of gymnastics moves alongside dancing and movements on the canes. Another one of my performances was a group vaulting act. The theme for this act was Ghostbusters, in which I played the character of a ghost and was tasked with scaring the audience and the Ghostbusters whilst vaulting over the equipment. The Halloween show was performed for 2 shows over 2 days, so I managed to perform both these acts twice, which allowed me to reflect on the previous show and improve on movements and certain decisions for the next one.
I first created the start to my solo act through hearing the music. My music was chosen for me by the director of the show, who is also our balance teacher. My music was Spooky by Dusty Springfield, which was Halloween related but also had a sultry slow essence to the melody. From this, I created my character of a snake, as I could relate my movements on and off the equipment to a character often portrayed as sly and seductive. Snakes are often involved with many people's phobias and fears, so it was a good character to instill fear to my audience, whilst also acting sneakily and sultry to act as a trap. To further elaborate on my character for my solo act, my makeup and costume contributed massively to my solo. My costume was a handmade silver snakeskin 2-piece consisting of a long sleeve crop top and high-waisted shorts. The material was shiny and iridescent, which reflected beautifully in the lights whilst performing and related to the shimmer of snake's scales. I also had dance tights which I wore throughout the whole show and completed them with tan ballet shoes which helped me with grip on the floor and the equipment. My makeup was the most difficult part of the process creating this solo. Firstly, the entire cast of the show had a couple of hours dedicated to experimenting with the makeup and face paint to make us all more comfortable and have a grasp on what designs we wanted for the show. I experimented with trying to create snake scales on my face with face paint and found the most effective thing was fishnet tights stretched over my face while using a sponge to paint over the tights. Once I removed the tights, the pattern had transferred onto my face, giving the effect of green scales with highlights of yellow paint on my cheekbones and forehead. Although the scales looked good, I didn't believe they would stand out on their own whilst under the harsh lights. To contrast this, I added winding black lines over my mouth and coming down from my forehead to create the illusion of snake shapes. This then enhanced my character and created an effective image whilst I was performing. I chose my hairstyle on my own and decided to do a Dutch plait down the centre of my head and then the rest of my hair gelled into a bun at the back of my head. This changed from when I originally experimented with hairstyles, as I wanted 2 messy space buns. However, the plait was more practical when performing and contributed to my character of a snake. My makeup and costume and hair completed my solo, as the colours I used along with the movement and lighting created the uneasy, alluring atmosphere I hoped for whilst creating this piece. My act on the hand canes was my very first performance on the canes. I had previous experience using the equipment but had never performed with them before, especially as the canes for my act were being placed on a tall metal table with stairs. The creative process was intense, and I managed to create a full dance within a day. However, it took a couple of weeks to change and mould the routine to the best standard. The main movements I decided to include were a one-arm planche, a series of different handstand moves such as splits, stag, straight, etc. My big finishing move was a Mexican handstand into a ring, which means touching my feet to my head whilst balancing on my hands. I decided to finish my act on this move as it's a difficult position to achieve and I wanted my audience to be shocked and impressed. A lot of my movements on and off the equipment were very slow and smooth, such as rolling my body and limbs, imitating such movements of a snake. I also included gymnastics moves in my solo, such as splits, walkover and a cartwheel flick at the beginning of the act to enter with a powerful start. These moves came easily to me whilst creating my solo due to having a gymnastics background, and I linked these moves with dance to create the ebb and flow that I wanted for my act. I made sure to create my solo to the music. This means that my movements were in perfect time to the beats. In the song, there are moments where there are 2 clicks. On the first ones, I placed my hands on the canes in time to the clicks. On the second time, I was in the elbow handstand and my legs split and then stagged on the 2 clicks. This made the movements more potent and powerful in my performance, which links to my character being powerful under threat, as snakes can pounce at any moment. After I had created my act and I was happy with my movements, I had to then begin to perform the piece. Snakes are well known for being sly and cunning, so I had to adopt a confident demeanour whilst dancing. I managed this by looking straight to the audience and smirking, winking and nodding my head and shoulder in a confident, seductive way. I believe my performance captured the audience, and due to us doing 2 shows, I was able to reflect and change what I needed to. For example, the first time I performed, I winked at a certain place in my routine, however it didn't feel right, so I changed it for the second time. Furthermore, I was faced with some challenges during my time in the show. At the end of the first show, I tripped on the curtain and rolled my ankle badly. I still managed to get straight back up to go out for the bows, however I was very worried that I wouldn't be able to perform the next show. I persevered and managed to get through both shows without letting my injury affect me, no matter how much it hurt. Another challenging experience was my makeup. Halfway through the show, I had to change costume and makeup, although the lighting backstage wasn't great, and we also had to ensure all rigging was completed and all props were in place for other performers, as we were also working as ringing assistants. To improve, I would make sure to have good lighting backstage and to not rush anything.
Another act I will be speaking about today is a group vaulting piece which has a Ghostbusters theme. As this was a group number, we had to start with the basics of vaulting. This included using a springboard and mats to get used to jumping at different heights and performing different skills to land on the mats. When the vaulting equipment was introduced, I had an advantage due to having previous experience with using a vault and a trampette in the past. The vault is a wooden rectangular box with padded material along the top, and we use the trampette to gain height to enable us to jump either on or over the vault and then land on the mats either side. One challenge we faced with the equipment during the shows was the difficulty of bringing all the equipment into the space and back off again. The vault was heavy and is an awkward shape which made it difficult to lift, and we all had to make sure we worked as a team to move it together at the same time.
The vaulting theme was Ghostbusters, which made our characters become either ghosts or Ghostbusters. My character was a ghost, and I chose a costume of a long white dress with grey ripped edges. After a few rehearsals in this costume, I realised that I would need a long-sleeved white top underneath, as the dress wasn't practical and became revealing after using the vaulting equipment. My makeup for this act didn't change much compared to my makeup from the opening act. I had a pale face with black face paint on my eyes and a skeleton nose. This makeup contributed to the character I was portraying and helped me create the scary exterior when facing the audience and grabbing towards them during this piece. Although my costume and face paint contributed a lot to this piece, my movements also enhanced my character. When we weren't vaulting, we had to crawl, walk, and move around the space in fluid movements. We had to get right in front of the audience whilst hissing and growling to create a scary atmosphere and really become the characters we were portraying. This pushed me out of my comfort zone, as it's new for me to make sounds at an audience whilst performing. This was difficult to achieve during rehearsals as I was embarrassed. However, with makeup, costume and lights, it gave me the confidence to perform to the best of my ability. The vaulting act started off with me crawling onto the vault and scaring the clown character of the show. It then proceeds to the rest of the group vaulting. We started with more basic jumps and then progressed into more difficult jumps, which made it more impressive for the audience. We faced some struggles whilst creating this piece. As vaulting is technical, it must stick to a certain order. We faced issues with some people in the group being absent for rehearsals, as well as 2 people dropping out of the show completely. This meant that the order had to adapt and change throughout the process, and people had to change their jumps and step in where possible. This act was particularly difficult due to a different range of abilities within the group. I had to vault more than others, as I was able to do better vaults than some of the others in the group, such as flipping over the vault and diving over multiple stacked bodies. This made the performance especially difficult for me, as I was constantly vaulting and doing the more complicated skills. If I had an opportunity to improve, I would push myself to do more difficult skills over the vault, and I would make sure to keep my ghost character intact throughout the performance, as I believe during the show I lost my character at certain points. The use of voice in this act added to the spooky essence of the characters and the performance. We had a dance break in the middle of this act, in which all the characters stopped vaulting and danced together. Afterwards, we all realised and have to scream at the audience. We had to make sure to project our voices over the music and make sure it didn't sound like a fake scream. This tells the audience that we didn't realise what we were doing, and we go back to chasing each other and spooking the audience. It also adds a bit of comedy to the performance, as it then became a silly piece and not so scary. To further elaborate, during the week of putting on the Halloween shows, we were working as scare actors in the Not Catch scare mazes. We had been doing this during the days, and this meant a lot of screaming and scaring people with our voices. Because of this, our voices then became very hoarse, and we struggled to use our voices in the show, especially in this act. Despite this slight challenge, the vaulting act was performed very well on both show days, although it could be improved if we didn't have people drop out of the performance.
To conclude, I faced many challenges whilst performing in the Halloween show, especially when I injured my ankle during the first show. I managed to still perform to the best I could under the circumstances, and we all worked as a team to help each other improve and be better whilst creating the show. For my personal development, I believe I can push myself more when creating performances. The movements in my solo act can be improved to showcase harder skills, such as straddled handstand, which I can now execute well due to practice. The vaulting act did create some tension throughout the group whilst rehearsing and performing due to dropouts and constant rearranging. So to improve, I would try not to be stressed and help my group during these processes.